All right, so today's topic is probably my favorite. That's why I teach it every cycle, and that's identifying your skills. I believe that skill identification is the basis for everything we do in job search. If you haven't identified your skills, it's really hard to promote yourself to a business. Businesses aren't as keen on the titles of jobs you've had for other employers because they might not match what they're used to. What they will understand is if you can market your skills that you can offer them based on your experience at other employers. Without your skills being identified, your resume is just a set of titles and dates. And I have seen resumes that look exactly like that. And it's a very long job search if you're using that. Now, there are some fields in which the title speaks for itself, and I get that. However, when you are looking for work, you're looking at a job posting in which they identify what makes you a qualified candidate. It's our job as job seekers to look at those qualifications, match them to our job history, and then promote the skills we've developed within that job history specifically to their needs. And we'll be talking about how we're going to do that as we go along here. So first, a pop quiz. Some of these things we'll just say to ourselves out loud. Some of them I'll ask you to put into the chat box. But the first thing is, I'm just going to ask you, what is a skill? You don't have to put this in the chat box, but we're going to define a skill as something you can do well. Okay, so there's a lot of things we can do. I'm not talking about walking or breathing, but things you can actually offer potentially an employer. At this stage, don't think of a specific employer. Don't think even within the work you've done before, but think of things that you're good at, okay, things that you can do. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to put this in the chat box. How many skills do you think the average person has? Okay, so I'm not asking you to list all yours. I won't do that, but just give me a number. What number of skills do you think the average person has? Okay, we see 12, 5, 10, hundreds, 75, 10, 5 to 10, 20, 435. That's a very specific answer. I like that. And I'm looking over at the chat box if you see me gazing over here. Above 10, that's a very diplomatic answer because that could be a whole bunch of things. Thank you for using the chat feature. If you said 40, I would challenge you to list 40 skills that you have because we're all at least average people. I'm sure. It's tough. It's very hard when you put pen to paper and you try to think of what skills do I have. The average person, and this is a pretty surprising number for most people, has between 500 and 800 skill sets or skills that they could potentially market to a wide variety of employers. Now, the reason it's so large is we tend to group our skills into a vocation or a job title. So if there's two examples I'm going to use, and I use these examples all the time. They're just easy to use. If I were to say that I'm a trainer, that I train people, that is a job title. The skills that are involved in doing that job are numerous. One of them is what I'm doing right now. I'm doing public speaking. But let's break that down further. I'm doing public speaking over a web-based medium. So there's technology there. There's knowledge of WebEx. There's troubleshooting internet issues. There's curriculum development. Of course, there's public speaking. There's all sorts, there's conflict negotiation. There is reading people's body language when it's in person. There's all sorts of different things that are involved in doing a job. The reason it's important to do that is unless you are looking for the same exact job with the same exact title, you're going to have to make the case that your skills transfer over to a new position. And sometimes it's just renaming our skills. So if someone wanted to hire me as a facilitator, great, now I'm a facilitator or an educator or a trainer. Whatever you want me to be, I've got the skills to back up to say that I can do that potentially. Another one is welding. When I talk to welders, I say, what's your skill set? There's only one thing I can do. I'm a welder. I've done it all my life. There's an enormous amount of skills inherent in the title welding. There's all sorts of different types of welding. There's MIG, there's TIG, cast iron, aluminum, I guess even. There's plasma torches, there's acetylene torches, there's all sorts of different things. And not every employer is going to need all of them potentially, but if you've identified them, if you've taken a piece of paper and you've written down everything you can offer, now you know the words to use. Now you look for words to match to job postings, and it becomes much easier to make the case to an employer that you can fill their needs. The reason I spend so much time on this is the average person can personally identify 10 skills. Think of that. You maybe have between 500 and 800 skills, and you can identify 10. Think of how much more difficult that makes your job search. So before you write a resume, before you go online, before you consider jobs, think about what do you have to offer these employers. And also, I like to put an asterisk or a star next to skills that I truly enjoy doing. One of the things I love to do is I love to make Excel spreadsheets. I'll be doing that the rest of today. That in no way was part of my job description, but because I listed it as a skill set, and that's something I enjoy doing, it's something I offered my employer. And that really has allowed me not only to do my job, but to do aspects of my job that I really like to do because I've been assigned those tasks. So think outside the box a little bit. Certainly you're going to have to meet the needs of what they want, but think about any value added skill set that you could keep in the back of your mind, and you could think about, is there any way that can be integrated into this position at some point? Because that leads to job satisfaction. There's a lot of things to think about in this, but the first thing to do is just blank slate, blank piece of paper, just start writing things down. And don't limit yourself. I mean, some of it's a little silly. I can ride a unicycle. I will never have a job that will require me to ride a unicycle, but I'm going to list it down there just because I'm going to put it all on a piece of paper and then see what matches what is required in today's job search. And to boil this all down, the percent of people who cannot sell or prove their skills during an interview, and I've interviewed hundreds of people, so I can attest to this, most people can't. The percentage we've come up with is about 80%. And the reason I totally believe that is that if I interview 5 people, and I'd like to have an interview pool of 5 people, I think that gives me a really good shot of finding a good candidate. I'm only going to hire one person. So only 20% of the people that I interview will actually get the job. So there's a 1 in 5 chance or 20% chance. The other 80% may have been able to do the job very well, but I'll never know. And the reason is they did not identify or sell or prove their skills during that interview to me. Unless it's a previously held connection, meaning someone that I already know their skills, they're going to have to make the case during the interview. And that's why it's really important to take these extra steps. All right, I see we had some issues with so audio. It looks like Heather's taking care of that. Thank you, Heather. So how do we develop skills? We develop skills through a whole bunch of different life experiences. The number one, and letter A here, is the most important for most employers because that is the most transferable in their mind. Meaning that if I wanted to, and sewing is a perfect example of this. So in my area, I live in northeastern Minnesota, or a little north of Duluth, but in my area, there are a lot, or at least quite a few, industrial sewing places, Duluth Pack, Frost River. And what they really want is someone with industrial sewing experience, because even if you're a hobbyist sewist, that's not the same thing. Just because you like to do a little knitting or sewing on the side, that's not the same thing as the actual work experience. However, if you don't have the work experience at all, possibly a hobby could give some value. Okay, so if you have the work experience, you really want to stress that. If you don't, then look at education, volunteer work, how you socialize with people. We'll talk about people skills as we go along. Those are very important. Potentially hobbies and sports. So we develop these through obviously all of these, but the most important for most employers is going to be relevant work experience. Not all of us have that. And especially when you're transferring to a new type of work, It's really important to take the holistic approach to skills identification and pull from everything from education to volunteer work to hobbies, sports, socializing, and then blend them in with your work experience and make a case that you have the skills to at least be considered for this job, to get into the interview. So I found this very interesting. I've been doing this type of work for over 20 years. And the first time I heard this, I was a little bit reluctant. I guess I thought it's nice to say that, but I don't think I really believed it. I do believe it now. And what I believe is the most important type of skill to employers is really soft skills. It's people skills. How will you fit in? Will you adapt? Will you learn? Certainly they want you to be able to do the job, but that's what really the application and the resume are for. That gets you to the interview. If you've been to a bunch of interviews or a few interviews, you're going to notice that a lot of the questions they ask aren't specific to the actual job. They're not, how do you take part A and part B and put them together to create a marketable product. It's more about, how do you handle conflict? How do you get along with people? How do you problem solve? They're what we call behavioral based interview questions. And the reason is, if you've got the basic skills, I can train you into the job. I'm willing to do that if I've got the right fit, the right person, someone who will adapt and will learn. And when I give them an opportunity to maybe go negatively, I say, tell me a situation in which you had a disagreement with a coworker. If you answer that in a professional and truthful manner, that's someone who maybe has the tact I'm looking for, that can get along with coworkers. Because any HR person will tell you the majority of their stress and their work is disagreements among staff and supervisors. It's people getting along. It's not people doing their job. Sometimes that's it. But in many cases, it's their ability to use soft skills to get along with coworkers, supervisors, and clients or customers. So don't take that out of consideration when you are thinking about your skills. Those are the harder ones to identify or to at least quantify. So think about, what I like to think about is past job reviews. I hate giving job reviews. I hate being part of job reviews, but they're a necessary part of what we do. So every year I have to take part in a job review, and it's a little nerve-wracking, but it's good information. It's good feedback. That feedback is the most honest you're going to ever get, because the idea is, how can you be a better employee? What do you do well? What do you need to improve on? And if a boss that you have worked for in the past says that you have done something well, that's an objective viewpoint. That's not you saying it, it's someone else saying it. So one of the really kind of most inventive methods of proving a skill is in an interview. I've had people say, in the course of my career, the most common thread in my job reviews is that my customer service is top notch, that I go above and beyond to help the customer. Wow, that's a powerful statement, because again, it's not you saying I'm good at something. It's you pulling information and saying, from reviews I've had, here's what I've been given feedback on. So look at those. If you've saved them, I saved them all, even the bad ones. Even if I were to get some negative or some criticism on one, I'd save that too, because that's after I get over the anger of being told that I'm bad at something, it's something I can look at and improve on. Potentially, if I look at it with a fresh set of eyes and agree that maybe there's some personal growth to happen there. But the positive things are really good marketing points, I believe. This one to me is key. The adapt or learn. In every interview I go into, I look for an opportunity to bring up a situation in which I've adapted to a new process. So I'm going to ask you in the chat box, has anyone ever been in an organization where maybe they had a new way of doing things, a new computer program that they use? Between you and your coworkers, was there reluctance? Was there anger maybe? Did anyone resist that change? I'm just going to take a look here. Yes, lots of reluctance. Yes, of course. And I know I asked that, and I almost guarantee that everyone's going to have done that. If you can bring up a situation on when maybe you've taken the lead or you've overcome the struggles of implementing this new process, that for an employer is golden, because they're looking at you as someone who doesn't complain about things, that understands that, hey, this is the way we do things now. How can we adapt to this? I mean, you don't have to, say things they want to hear necessarily, but you do bring up things in which you have performed at a level that could benefit them. So I always bring up, we had a new platform come on and I volunteered to do some training for additional staff, or I was asked to be a helper for those who weren't, understanding this, or once we got over the shock of this new system, I found it to be a better way of doing things. Almost every organization, in fact, every organization goes through this, and you bringing up one of those stories will tell an employer that you adapt and you learn. And I think that's really important as a skill set. So we'll go through one more slide here, and then we'll stop for any questions that Heather might have. So how does identifying your skills help you in your job search? I hope you already know this answer because I've been talking about it nonstop for now 20 minutes. It helps you to prove your abilities to employers through both your resume, your applications, and selling your qualifications in an interview. It's really goes the entire width and breadth of your job search. It's all about skills. Identifying your skills helps you in every bit of your job search. It also helps you when you start to work, because you know what you want to do. You volunteer for things that, they say, does anyone want to take the lead on this? I guess that's something I enjoy. So yes, I would. Or maybe something you don't enjoy and you realize that has caused you problems in work. So maybe those are certain projects that you would stay away from volunteering for, potentially. Heather, are there any questions we need to get into before we move along?
Just one that I saw, and it was, is it possible to get copies of past reviews from employers if you did not save them and are no longer working at some of those places?
I can't speak for any individual employer, but generally if there is a file, and in every employer I've worked for, their staff has a permanent record, they have a file, you could potentially ask. At the very least, you could do that. Now, at some point, they may have, a 5-year turnover in which they shred everything. Some employers, especially smaller employers, might not do that, but most larger employers would have a process by which you could ask for that. Now, let me talk about that as just a tactic overall. At some point, your previous employment, no matter how it went, whether you got let go, you were dislocated, or you were fired, or whatever, that can have an impact onto your next employment. It doesn't mean that if you're fired, it's going to, tank any other possibility. It just means that you're going to have to deal with your former employer. So any contact you have with them, it's not a bad idea to kind of reestablish those communication lines, because you might have to ask them, what information do you give when someone calls about my past employment? And oh, by the way, would it be possible to get some copies of my performance reviews for the last couple of years? That can really help to kind of smooth over some maybe a bad ending potentially to previous employment. Is there anything else, Heather?
No, that was it for now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about the types of skills. I try not to get too wound up in categorizing skill sets. I know I already talked about soft skills, but skills are skills. I don't worry about what pot they end up in, what category, what folder you put them in. But generally, there are 3 types of skills that we talk about. One are soft skills, and that's what we use to get along with others, or self-management. Then there's job-specific skills. This would be the welding skills, or the Excel skills, or industrial sewing skills. Those are hard skills, is another term for them. Transferable skills can be a combination of both. I tend to think that soft skills are, as a whole, more transferable to any line of work. So if you're looking at, what skills do I have that are needed for this job, because I haven't done this type of work before, look at the type of skills they ask for that are soft skills, and you can generally make an easier case for those to transfer. If you do not have some transferable skills, hard skills, then there's a couple things to think about. One, is this the right job for you? If they're asking for something that you don't have and you can't meet the minimum requirements, you may be wasting your time. However, if you are in process with those skills, there can be an opportunity to make the case that you're on your way to that. So instead of saying, I've never used, and I'm going to use Excel as an example again, I've never used Microsoft Excel in a work environment. I know it's a big part of what you do. So what I've been doing while I've been unemployed is I've been taking a free online course through GCF Learn Free that allowed me to kind of upgrade my skill sets in that. And I'm on my way to really having a firm understanding of that. That's better than saying, I don't know that program. If it's listed on the job posting, they're going to bring it up. And so try to think about any gaps you have in skills and have an answer for them. Have an answer for why. And if you're lucky enough to get past the screening into the interview with a skill you don't have it in process, or have a general understanding, at least research what it would take to get up to speed with that. So the reason skills are so important is people who succeed in business generally have confidence and they know their skills. And really, I have found that people who seem to be promoted the most are the people who have the best soft skills. They get along with people. It doesn't matter how good you are at what you do. If no one wants to work with you, it's really hard to climb that ladder. And you may be perfectly okay at whatever job you're at, and that's just perfectly fine. But it is a combination of hard skills and soft skills. And I'm not going to beat that to death anymore. But there's a quote from Bill Gates. My people have the confidence of their convictions and they know their skills. All right. So we've talked about the 3 types of skills. I hope I've beaten home the point of understanding the importance of identifying your skills, and we all have an idea of how to identify your skills. Now, what I'll be sending everyone is a couple of like questionnaires, surveys, quizzes, I guess. They're skills identification exercises. I'll send you a few different ways of doing that. One is an online, just answer a bunch of questions. I'll also be giving you the link to ONET. Don't worry about writing this down. I'll be sending it in the email. ONET is a website that is really nice because what you can do is you can type in your previous position. And what it's going to do is it's going to talk about the skills that are generally associated with that type of work. And many of them you may just say, well, no, everyone knows that. Everyone assumes that. They don't. You are marketing yourself in most cases to an HR person, not someone who does what you do. They're just looking at a job description and they're matching your skills to a job description. So don't leave anything off the table by saying, well, they're going to know. No, they won't. Look at the type of work you've done, pull out the general skills and see if they match the job description you're now applying for. So the ONET website is really, really good. There's a ton of information. In fact, it's almost overwhelming how much information there is there. But I highly recommend when I send you the link that you check on it. And then there's just some quick quizzes or feedback surveys that will give you some ideas of where your skills lay, where your interest lays. I really like doing those because it really gets me out of my rut. It gets me thinking in new directions. So we're going to talk a little bit about applications now. I'm not a big believer in, I don't find a lot of joy in filling out applications. And the reason is many employers, I hate to say it, look at your resume as opposed to your application. However, I don't know that for sure about any individual employer. So always assume that an application and a resume hold equal weight. And also, and this is probably something that most people don't know, they also have to stand on their own. Never assume that the person who looks at your application sees your resume or vice versa. I was shocked when I went into an interview once and some of the things that I put on my application, they had no idea. They hadn't even seen my application. What had happened was the HR department had looked at the application and then sent resumes on to the hiring committee without the applications. So they were just looking at my resume. And I've worked with people who have taken like dates of employment completely off their resume, saying, well, that's on my application. If you don't have dates of employment, I mean, there are reasons. I get it. So if you've got long-term unemployment, there are other methods that we talk about next week as far as a skills-based resume. But if you have somewhat current employment, I'm going to say within the last year or so, make sure you have dates of employment on your resume, because when they're not there, it causes a red flag for employers, even if they're on your application. Sometimes you want to stress the transferable skills more, so your dates are just line items. They're just, here's the title of what I did, here's where I did it, and here's the dates I did it. And they're at the bottom of the page, maybe. There are resume formats that are like that. They still have to be there because many employers do not consider applicants whose resumes don't have dates on them. But in applications, it's very prescriptive. They tell you exactly what you need to put on the document. So make sure that you have the information ready before you start, even if you're doing it at home. You don't want to drag it out to several hours. Sometimes you time out of certain applications. I've worked with clients that job seekers that have not had everything and then had worked on it for like 3 hours, and then it timed out, and then they had to start the process all over again. So I'll be sending everyone a personal data sheet, a couple different versions, an attachment and an online version of this. Make sure that you have that filled out. Get your dates of employment. I realize that that can be difficult, and that's another good reason to call a former employer to find out dates of employment. Because when you put it on an application, you are saying that you have this level of experience, and that's kind of legally binding. So I'll give you an example for state employment. Like I work for the state of Minnesota. If they require 2 years of experience, you need to demonstrate that you have 2 years of experience. And that does not mean saying you work from 2019 through 2020. I'm going to ask you, and put it in the chat box, if you put on a resume or your application that you worked from 2019 to 2020, how much experience would an employer be able to give you credit for? How much experience? Okay, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. I mean, potentially you could say it's 2 years, right? Because if it was 2019 all the way through 2020, it could be. It's not 2 years. It's not 1 year. It's not a month. It's not a week. They will give you credit for 2 days, because all you can prove off of what they said there was December 31st of 2019 through January 1st of 2020. That's 2 days. I know that sounds really, really mean, but they are legally responsible to only hire people who meet the qualifications. So in certain employers, you really got to know what their needs are. So research how that employer wants their information. It's a great idea to call, but when in doubt, and if you can't call and if you can't get that information, don't assume anything. For state employment, I would give actual dates, and I don't do this for every employer. And I wouldn't do it for the state if I have 5 years of experience and they only require 2. However, if they say required 2, and then they say beneficial to have 5, and you do have 5 and it's real close, then use the actual dates, the month, the day, the year. And on the application, you do that similarly, okay? Now, some employers aren't that picky. They're not going to look that closely, and it can be very difficult to get the exact dates. Calling your former employer is the easiest way to get the dates. However, that's not always possible, but I have found that if you hear no a couple times and you still kind of push forward and you try a few new things, generally you can get those dates. Sometimes it's not possible, though. I understand that. There is a process. If it was paid work where you paid taxes and everything, you can pay Social Security, the Social Security Administration, to do a lookup on your taxable income. And I think it's like $100. It's not free. And they can look up and they can find your exact dates of employment. If you get them, put them in a trusted place. Email it to yourself, do whatever. You don't want to lose that information once you find it, okay? Well, we'll finish up applications here and then we'll stop for a few questions. You want to make sure that in everything you put out there in the job hunt, that you're positive and honest, okay? Now, does that mean that, what if it's negative? You say, well, I can honestly say that was a negative experience. You just leave it out, okay? You only bring up things that benefit you, and going negative does not benefit you in a job hunt. Very seldom do I see it on a resume, but I have seen it on an application, and it's that one question: why did you leave your last employment? That seems like a question that opens up the floodgates of emotion, and people want to tell why they were let go, and they want to advocate for themselves, and they want to say it wasn't my fault, and it very well may not have been your fault. Good people get fired every day, and many times it's not their fault. However, it doesn't help you to explain it on an application. So I just put involuntary separation. If you were fired from a job, put involuntary separation. If you were laid off from a job, then you might go into a little more description because it could help you. You could say, permanently laid off due to site closure, okay? Now, many people who are fired don't want to deal with it and will say laid off or dislocated. Don't do that. That'll come back to bite you because eventually they'll find out. But involuntary separation, and then prepare an answer that explains why you were let go if they ask it in an interview. That's a great opportunity, by the way, to talk one-on-one with someone at CareerForce. If you register for one of the one-on-one appointments, and that can be over the phone, online, or in person, come with all the details and explain the situation. We'll help you come up with a succinct answer that explains what happened, more importantly, explains why it's not an issue going forward, but doesn't place blame. And I know that's really hard to do. What you need to think about, though, is if you place blame, and there very well may be blame there to be given, it only hurts you. It won't hurt your former employer. It'll only kind of lessen your chances with the current employer, because they're thinking about, 5 years down the road, if I let go of this person, these are the things they'll be saying about me. And I get the emotion of it, and that's relevant, and I'm not dismissing it. It just doesn't help you in employment generally, okay? Let's stop for a couple questions. I see the chat box going crazy here. Any questions we need to get to?
Yeah, we do have quite a few. One was asked a couple times, so I'll ask that one first. When looking for a new job, what happens when a previous employer let you go after an injury or illness?
Okay, so generally they won't be able to talk about that. So verifying with the employer, just saying, hey, I'm doing a new job search. I'm ready to go with it, my job search, and I need to know what information is disclosed when someone checks on my former employment. Now, I've heard many people say that legally they can only give dates of employment. That's not true. They can tell them whatever they want. Generally, they don't, though, and the reason is they don't want to get sued. They don't want to be able to say that you lied, or that something happened that prevented you from getting a job. So if an employer can absolutely prove that you stole from them, let's say, I stole, I robbed my employer and I was charged and I was convicted, they can say that because they can prove it. If they didn't like me, they'll probably just say, Mr. Larson worked from this date to this date, and that's our policy, and that's the information we give. Now, if you were hurt at work and it is no longer an issue, you can choose whether you want to disclose that or not. You can choose to say, I did at the time, I had an at-work injury that prevented me from being able to do the job I needed to do at that time. And so I was able to take some time off. It was a real blessing. I have since recovered from that. It is not an issue going forward. I do have a work clearance from my doctor, and I'm very excited about this opportunity. And that is up to you, as all disability-related information and disclosure are. But if you believe that you can do the job as listed, you don't necessarily have to disclose, but if it can benefit you, that's your choice.
Great. We do have another one. Using the example of Excel, one person may think their skills are excellent, but that is their own description. An employer would say they are good. What is the best way to handle describing your own skills?
I've used this example so many times, Heather. It's almost like I put that in the chat box. So thank you, whoever did this. I dislike when people put proficient in Excel or excellent or put whatever adjective in front of a skill set, because you're absolutely right. That's very subjective. It's based on what you needed to use it for. I consider myself to be advanced at Excel. In some circles, I would be an absolute beginner. So don't talk about what you believe your skills are. Talk about what you can do with them. So ability to create and navigate pivot tables, use of advanced financial functions to calculate profit margins, cross-reference Excel spreadsheets to online platforms. Look at what their needs are and bring up a relevant duty you've done in the past or can do that would meet those needs. Sometimes you can mix and match. What I've done in the past is I've looked at employers that need, let's say, grant writing, and then they need reporting, and they need Excel. I can put them all into one skill statement. Utilized a cross-referenced Excel spreadsheet to document grant expenditures over a 4-year period. Okay, that puts numbers in there. It puts a few different skills. I mean, of course, you can go overboard with that, but talk about what you can do with those skills. Or here's what I did, because I taught Excel I still teach Excel. I didn't want to say self-taught at Excel. So what I did is I quantified that skill set by taking a test, and that did cost me money. There are some free tests you can take through North Star Digital Literacy. I'll try to include that link in the email I send. But I took the Microsoft Office Specialist certification, and that is a Microsoft certificate that just basically gives a baseline to employers. So if it's that important to the job, you might consider that. But great question. Thank you very much. Any more before we move on? We can maybe take one more.
Okay, yeah, we have one more. How do you apply for positions that you have the life skills for, but not necessarily the required job skills or experience?
Yeah, that's that whole soft side of it. Employers are very careful with, they only want to interview. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it obviously does, but employers really want to make sure they're only considering applicants or interviewing applicants that meet the minimum requirements. So if you do not meet the minimum requirements, you need to make a case that you have transferable skills that would likely meet the requirements. So if it says something like, this requires a bachelor's degree, someone might say, hey, 20 years of on-the-job experience trumps that. Employers are more moving towards this or this. So really look at those types of jobs, a bachelor's degrees or 5 years of related experience. That's where you kind of have an out on that kind of stuff. But if it specifically says it requires something that you do not have, maybe calling ahead before you go through that whole process. The more personal you make your job search, the shorter your job search becomes, I believe. Now that means that you're going to hear no sometimes, or we don't do that, or you're going to be frustrated because there's no one to talk to. But if you can get to talk to one person, that can turn into an on-the-spot interview. I've done it. I've done it for job seekers, where we've had a question about a job posting and whether we should invest the time into applying for it. And once they got on the phone, now you're a person. And once you're a person, you're looked at through a different lens than a piece of paper. That does not mean you call every employer and bug them until someone can talk to you, but make the effort. If it's a job you're really interested in and you think you've got 99% of what they need, and there's this one thing that's causing you problems, calling sometimes will allow you the grace to send that application. All right, just a couple additional things on applications. Make sure that you follow directions, you're complete. Don't leave anything blank, even if it doesn't apply. Put not applicable or NA. Most online applications do not even allow you to get to the next page unless you've completed everything. But if you're writing something by hand, a blank space on an application, if they've got enough applications, means yours get tossed, because that's the first thing they look for. Is it neat? Is it complete? If they've got enough applicants to look for, and in today's job market, they don't necessarily. It's a very tight job market for employers. Employers are really struggling right now. And I get it, it's not necessarily the job you want or an industry you have experience in, but there are a ton of jobs there. I've never seen a higher discrepancy between job postings and resume postings on Minnesota Works. It's like a 10 to 1. So they're not finding as many applicants, so they're being less picky about their screening process, but it still means that once you get to that interview, you're going to have to market your skills. So always put your best foot forward, make sure you're following all their directions, you're being complete and you're being neat. I'm going to show you how important it is to proofread your resume, your application. One of the things we do at CareerForce is we can do a resume review for you through one of those online appointments or in-person appointments. Let me show you how important it is to get a fresh set of eyes on something. There's nothing tricky about this. In this white area, just in this white area, I want you to read through these 4 lines. I want you to count the number of F's, F as in Frank, that you see, and put it in the chat box. Okay, real simple. Just count the number of F's you see in that white box, 4 lines of text, and put it into the chat feature, please. Take a couple, about 10, 15 seconds to do that. Okay, I've seen the entire run. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've yet to see a 1 or a 2. A lot of 3s. Now you might ask yourself, how could there possibly be any other number than what I put in there? Because this is a very simple exercise. He's just asking me to count the number of F's. Doesn't take a genius to look and see how many F's there are. So if you got 3, you're right, there are 3 F's in this document. We've got finished, we've got files, and we've got scientific. I don't know how people get 4 or 5, but there's actually 6. So there's 3 plus 3 more. Of, and of. Now this is not an intelligence test, so don't worry about this, not to make anyone feel bad. It's just to demonstrate how easy it is to miss things, even when we're looking at them with a fresh set of eyes, which you're not doing on your resume or your application. You've looked at your resume so many times, it's impossible to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. Giving it to someone else will generally allow them to find things that you've missed. They'll read through it and they will not be hearing it in their head as you envisioned it. So what made perfect sense to you may not make sense to them. If it doesn't make sense to them, you need to reword it because they're the audience. They're the new person looking at it for the first time. It needs to make sense to someone in the first read through. Also, especially at CareerForce here, we're used to looking at resumes. We can see formatting issues. If a resume doesn't have any other issues, sometimes there's formatting hiccups with how things are spaced and how things line up. Generally, we can clean up a resume fairly quickly. We can't create a resume from scratch for you. That's not something we can do. It just, we don't know your skills. We don't know what you're marketing. Next week, when we talk about resumes extensively, they'll send you out some, if you're interested, they'll send you out some templates. You can also find some templates on careerforcemn.com. And you can kind of get your stuff on paper. Once it's on paper, we can help you polish it. We can help you clean it up. But you need to identify your skills, put down your job history, and get a good start. So this is just kind of a fun exercise. I saw this on a late night news program in the 90s when I was working overnights at a job on a break. I saw this and I was just astounded. I thought, how could there possibly be 6? So it's kind of a fun little thing to do. All right, some reason for leaving on your application or during your interview. On the application, generally we say involuntary separation if it was not your choice. If it was your choice, if you resigned, I don't like just saying, well, never say quit. That's too negative of a term. If you resigned, there's perfectly legitimate reasons for resigning, but I'm going to wonder if you just leave it at resign. So you might want to go into some additional information. Resigned to pursue educational opportunities, resigned due to family relocation. Now, they can't ask you if you have a family, but it makes more sense to put it in there. Remember, even questions that are you may think of as illegal, if they help you in your job search, don't try not to be that knee-jerk reaction of, why do they ask me that? That's an illegal question. If you're okay with them knowing, just answer the question. If you truly are not, and they ask you a question, you can bring up, well, could you let me know what that has to do with this potential position? Even then, it comes off as somewhat aggressive, but if you don't want to answer the question, I get it. But don't always assume that there's negative intent when they ask something. Or if you choose to disclose something, even though they can't ask, sometimes it does benefit you. You can put voluntary separation. That sounds better than resign. But again, if you have a logical reason that doesn't pose any additional questions, you might actually tell them why you resigned or why you were voluntarily separated. Again, if you were laid off, add a little bit of extra information that'll help to, in their mind, kind of solidify that that's actually what happened, because I've seen many, many times where someone says they were laid off and they were actually fired. So next we're going to talk about portfolios. And this is kind of my shtick. I really like the idea of portfolios. When people hear portfolios in employment, they generally think about maybe an architect or an artist or something like that, or maybe a marketing person. Anyone can have a portfolio. It's something you bring along. It's hard copies of the documents they probably have received digitally. So if I'm going to interview in a panel interview, I bring several copies of my resume, several copies of my cover letter, several copies of my reference sheet. Generally, I don't hand them out to everybody, and I might not hand them out to anybody. They may have printed copies. But I have been in a panel interview of 6 people at a large employer, and no one had a copy of my resume. And they felt a little embarrassed about it, and they were going to go print it off. And I said, oh, that's okay. I've got copies for everyone. And I handed them out. Now, does that mean I may print off some, waste a little paper? I don't get that many interviews. I'm willing to do that. So I think of a portfolio as serving multiple purposes. One, it's something you can look at in the waiting room while you're waiting for your interview. It gives you something to have in your hands besides your phone. Now, could this exist on your phone? Sure, you could have your notes, you could have your resume, you could be looking through it, but it looks like you're on Facebook to the receptionist and to whoever goes and gets you. I get it. You can use phones for very professional purposes. I just generally don't want that to be the first impression they see is me on my private phone. So I bring the portfolio because it gives me something to look at, and I can review my notes. References are generally not checked until after the interview. That's not the same for everybody, but in many cases, they only check the references of the chosen candidate. So if they haven't asked for my references, even though maybe I put them on the application, I always offer them at interview. I give them a hard copy of it. I also include a letter of recommendation. Now, many people have different thoughts about this. I've been asked to give letters of recommendation. Sometimes I'm comfortable doing it, sometimes I'm not. Think about who is the best person to talk about your relevant skills to this position. And then ask them, give them a little forewarning. I'm applying for a position that has a lot to do with the same skills that I utilized when I worked for you, or when we did that project together, or that company we used to work for, and ask them to write a letter of recommendation. It's a lot to ask. I realize that, but it can be very impactful. At least it has been in my career. I've used it at different points. Sometimes you can attach it as part of your application process. Sometimes I've handed it to the employer along with copies of my resume in an interview. Sometimes I've used it as a follow-up technique. So when I hadn't heard from them in a couple of days or a week or whatever, I sent them a letter of recommendation from a former employer to sweeten the pot. And I truly believe that's what got me one of my jobs, is that extra value added thing that other applicants weren't willing or didn't know to do. It was an effective follow-up technique. Another thing is work samples. So this can be used in pretty much any industry. If you're a welder, pictures of your weld. If you're a public speaker, maybe you email them a link to a YouTube video of you public speaking. Whatever is part of your industry or part of your experience or part of your skill set, think about, maybe have you put together a marketing flyer? An Excel document, if you redact any information, maybe you put together a sample spreadsheet that you put together. Also, you can put copies of certificates or licensures. Anything you list on your resume will have to be proven at some point for most employers. This can happen years down the road. I worked for an employer for 7 years, and they said, oh, it says that you went to this school from this time to this time and you have this many credits. Prove it. My job depended on me being able to validate what I had put on my resume 7 years ago. And I had to go to the college admissions and get my transcript, have all that information ready, because I'll tell you, one of the tipping points for me as an employer in hiring from an excellent pool of candidates was one of the candidates left me with a portfolio that had everything I would need if I were to hire this person. It had copies of their certificates they listed, it had work samples, it had an excellent letter of recommendation, and that itself speaks to skill sets. That's organization, that's being very professional, that's networking. There's a lot of things that are inherent to just creating that portfolio. So it's something to think about. Whatever you do with your portfolio, though, make sure that the documents you create are branded. And I'm going to use branding very specifically here. There's a lot of different ways to think of branding. I'm going to think of just branding as far as what it looks like. So I've got an example here of a resume. Your resume does not have to look like this, but here's an example resume that generally looks like a resume you might be able to see. If I received this from John Smith, I received this resume, and then his cover letter looked like this. And by the way, I see this a lot. People get help with their resume. The cover letters are one-offs. You know, they're really specific to that employer, and people don't generally put as much effort into them. If they're required, they put them. If they're not required, they're optional. People generally don't. I always do, being fully aware that it may have no impact on my chances. I always do it because it could have impact. Always be willing to do what other candidates aren't. And if it's as simple as submitting a cover letter, if they allow it, mine as well. If you're going to do it, though, make sure you brand it to your other information. My reference sheet, my cover letter, my resume all look the same. So look at the difference on the right-hand side when I brand it to my resume. See the difference there? Exact same information, same content, but totally different perception at first look. And remember, the first kind of idea they're going to get about you is how your resume looks. Before they read anything, they're going to look at, does it look like a resume? Is it organized? Is it formatted correctly? If it's not, you're already kind of, you know, doing an uphill battle to gain their trust in your skill sets. So meet expectations at every phase. And by the way, all it really is taking your same font, same margins, taking your heading from your resume, copying it over. I'll send everyone also, and you'll get this next week if you join also, but I'll send you a link to specifics on cover letters. Our creative job search is online. I'll send you the link to that. And there's some cover letter examples there. I did want to spend a little bit of time handling any questions we have at the end here. So we do have about 5 minutes. Heather, are there any questions we need to get to?
Yeah, we have quite a few, so I don't know if we will be able to get to all of them.
Okay, we'll get to as many as we can.
Okay, perfect. We'll start with this one. Would you write on your resume that you were in progress of a in progress of a certain job skill, or would you just wait and say that in the interview?
So to whatever level you can do it, you know, there are sections that are not tied to employment. You know, you can do a relevant skills section or other skills or whatever. There's a lot of different ways you can format your resume. If you don't want to attach your skills, your in progress skills to employment because you didn't do them in employment, you can certainly do that, but be very honest about where you're at with them. Yeah, if I'm in progress with something, I definitely want to put it because it hits the keywords, but in progress doesn't mean I looked up and there's a training course available and I'm going to do that someday. You have to be in progress. And you can say currently taking a course in, you know, human-centered design. That's in progress.
Great, thank you. The next one is, do you have one letter of recommendation or multiple, and how old can those letters be?
So if they're over if they're dated, you know, and generally they are going to have a date on them, and it's a good idea to have them. What I've done in the past is if I have one that's really good and it's a really good reference for me and it's on my, and I want to keep it, what I'll do is I'll retype the entire thing and I will send it to that person so they don't have to re-enter anything. I make it as easy as possible and say, hey, this helped me get a job last time. I really think this could help me in my next step of my career. Would you mind putting today's date, re-signing and sending it to me? Make it as easy as possible for them. On LinkedIn, when you do it, and LinkedIn is a whole nother process, you're really stuck in order. So again, what you might do is copy that entire recommendation off LinkedIn, send it to that person, ask them to resubmit, delete their previous one, because that's the only way you can reorder them currently. And that might have changed in the 2 seconds I've been talking about this, because they changed quite a bit. And then you put that on there as the first one.
And following the letter of recommendations, how does a letter of recommendation work when you are going from one job field to another? Example, social work to a tech company.
So you're going to talk more about the soft skills, how, you know, a team player, you know, ask them to talk about what's relevant to the position. You want to leave out industry jargon that does not relate. And the only way a reference is going to know that is if you coach them a little bit. I'm not a big believer in saying, here's what I want you to say, just sign it. I don't like that. I know people do that. I don't like that. I want them to become fully invested in my job search. And the more I explain how relevant my experience with them is to my current need for employment, the more invested they're going to be. And they're going to help me look for work, actually. You know, asking someone to write a letter of recommendation pays extra dividends because now you've reconnected with them. Now they know you're looking for work. Now you've updated them on what you've been doing since you last met. And you really have an advocate, a strong advocate. Also have them review your resume if you're getting a positive response. I got one more question, then we'll wrap it up.
Perfect. How do you handle online applications that ask for salary ranges?
So there's a lot to this, and you get a lot of different advice on it. And I'll give you mine. Again, you know, this is art's advice on this. There are a lot of tools out there, more than ever, to get a general idea of what a job pays. Glassdoor.com is a place that will even expose what their salary is. Networking with someone who worked at a previous company would give you an idea of what jobs start at. It'll give you a range. Even though they don't want you to know that range, you can generally figure that out. The reason employers don't give a range is because once they give the wage on a job posting, that's all people look at. Or not all, everyone, but a lot of people, they focus solely on that. So they're not making their decision on whether they would be happy working there, whether they see themselves long-term there. They're making their decision on, does this meet my immediate needs? When you take a job that only meets your immediate needs, you are very fluid in your employment. And employers don't like fluid employees because they invest in training you. That's why they want to find someone who wants to work there as opposed to someone who wants this level of salary. Of course, that's our biggest consideration. I totally understand that, or one of our biggest considerations. So do your research, figure out about what the job pays, slot yourself into, based on your experience, where you see yourself within that. Generally, it doesn't in any way lock you into anything, but if you ask for more than the job check generally pays, that could filter you out. So give yourself, do what other people are not willing to do, and that is research. There's a lot more to that question, but we could spend the entire hour on contract negotiation or salary negotiation. Like Heather said, today's session was recorded, and I will take a look at the chat box and see if there's any questions hanging out there, and I'll reach out to those that didn't get their questions answered. I want to thank everybody for taking the time on a Tuesday morning to spend an hour with us to talk about skills identification. I'm hoping everyone got a couple nuggets here and there that can help them. Thank you, Heather, for your help in the chat box. And please reach out to careerforcemn.com and register for an appointment if there's something you'd like to talk to us about. We would love to talk to you. Good luck in your job search, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.